A warning, this podcast references abuse, suicide and contains content that some listeners may find disturbing. Kia ora, I'm Jimmy Allingham and today on The Detail, they suffered horrific abuse, including electric shocks and paralysing injections.
It was horrific. It was heartbreaking. It was wrong, and it should never have happened.
That's Prime Minister Christopher Luxon saying sorry to victims of abuse in state and faith-based care. A month later, Erica Stanford announced there would be compensation for Lake Alice torture victims.
Survivors will be able to choose either an expedited payment of $150,000 or an individualised process where each claim is assessed by an independent arbiter who will make determinations on payment amounts.
So far, 74 out of 118 eligible survivors have decided to take the rapid $150,000 payment.
I was a bit emotional when I heard the announcement, and I just think $150,000, why fight it? You know, that's a lot of money for us now. We're all elderly.
Survivors had until last week to decide whether or not to accept the money. 44 have decided to negotiate individual settlements. Malcolm Richards has decided to take matters into his own hands. He's filed a judicial review against the government offer, arguing it breaches New Zealand's obligations under the UN Torture Convention.
$150,000 doesn't make up just for the loss of income. It doesn't cover the rehabilitation we require.
Later in the podcast, we'll hear human rights lawyer Lydia Osterhoff and why she thinks the government's redress offer doesn't go far enough. We'll also hear from Robin Dandy, one of the survivors, who decided to accept the one-off payment. But we begin in a Wellington hotel room overlooking the harbour where Malcolm Richards and his wife Sharon are having a breather after filing the judicial review and facing the press conference that followed.
Pretty relieved it's over. It was quite a load to make sure I got it right. This is a lot of people's lives riding on this decision.
What are you seeking from the High Court?
I'm seeking for them to tell the government that they've broken the law and they need to follow the law.
And that's with the offer of redress or compensation to Lake Alice torture victims?
No, to all torture victims, no matter whether they're Lake Alice or any other institution. Once they're proven they were tortured, they should also get the same.
How's the law been broken?
Well, they haven't followed the UN's protocols on torture redress. It's not just monetary. There's very little, if any, rehabilitation offered at all. There's some word of something happening down the track, but to find that out, we've just got to wait and hope they'll do the right thing. We've got to sign away all our rights to receive the payout to start with. And I've said, no, I don't want to be part of that.
Was it something you even considered when that Lake Alice scheme was announced just before Christmas?
No, I was rung up by Minister Stanford before it was announced, and when she said the amount, I immediately said, no, don't want any part of that. And then found out more that it wasn't even following the proper rules.
And the rules say, don't they, something along the lines of someone, as well as getting financial compensation, also have to be as close as possible or as much as possible restored to what they've lost because of their torture, don't they? So in your case, what would that be?
Well, they'd have to restore all the money I lost or the time I was out of work. There's times I was out of work and not even on a benefit. And then there's the cognitive difficulties I have all the time that I have documented, so they're proven that they're that and not dementia. They can't fix those. So somehow they've got to compensate me for those. $150,000 wouldn't even compensate for the money I've lost being out of work. And there's no clear path to how we're going to get there.
Do you have a total in mind about what you'd like to see for you? Because I know you're saying that everyone should be assessed individually, but do you have a total and a wider package in mind for what would suit your needs?
No, I can't pluck a figure out of the air or think like that. I need the court to say what it should be
When were you in Lake Alice, and what happened to you broadly there? How were you tortured?
I was in Lake Alice in 75. So I was working before I was put in there. Once I was put in there, I didn't like it very much and tried to run away. I got put in a cell and left for days. We had a plastic bucket for a toilet. I thought, I can't cope with this, and I tried to hang myself in my cell. They came in, took the bed out, took all the blankets out, took all my clothes, came back, shocked me to the legs. That'll teach you for running away. I peed on Dr. Leeks because I lost control of my bowels, and he said, I'll teach you for peeing on me, and he put the electrodes on my genitals where I got a burn. And lost control of my bowels again. Because I was in such a mess, they picked me up, carried me through the dormitory, dumped me in a cold bath of water and shocked me again, where I almost drowned. And to this day, just struggle taking my pills with water. I take them with juice or something, or even drinking a glass of water. I start getting flashbacks and trembling, and so I avoid usually glasses with water. And
what are some of the other effects? Because I recall at your Royal Commission evidence, you spoke about when you were working, you had memory loss problems.
Oh yes, all the memory losses followed me or from job to job, and I forget what bosses have told me to do and get yelled at and abused and put up with that for a length of time, and then either just leave and take off to some other part of the country or get sacked just because I can't remember what to do, or get lost going places they've told me to go and collect this or do that. And it's a real struggle to hold down jobs.
During his time at Lake Alice, Malcolm saw a boy being taken away to get electric shocks. He says he was told the boy later died. When he eventually managed to escape, Malcolm tried to tell the police about the case, but was threatened with arrest for wasting their time. Years later, he collected signatures for a Royal Commission of Inquiry into Abuse and Care, which looked at the Lake Alice unit in 2021. The following year, the UN ruled in Malcolm's favour that New Zealand was in breach of its anti-torture obligations over the Rangatike institution. Now he's still fighting and paying from his own pocket to do so.
Yes, well, lawyers aren't free. Under the UN rules, government is supposed to pay for the lawyer to allow you to take legal action, but they are only paying for the lawyers to give you advice on which illegal way to jump. They're not going to fund this fight, so yes, I'll have to put the bill for it.
And how have you done that?
So far out of my own pocket, but I do have a little page with a little more than it cost to file the proceedings today, but it will cost a good deal more than that by the time we finish this, I would say.
And you've got the money to do that?
Well, I've got some money from a ACC previous case put aside, and I've cashed in all my Kiwi Saver to put aside to fight for this.
It's winter. It's coming into winter.
Now I'm at the former site of the Lake Alice Institution. It's a windy, cold Sunday, and more than 25 years after the facility closed for good, there's very little sign of what used to be here. I'm here with Robin Dandy, who was in the child and adolescent unit in the early days. I asked her what it's like coming back.
I'm okay with it now. I think that door is closed now and a new door's opened for us to just move on with our lives. What the government has given us in the way of compensation, as we all know, won't ever make up for what we went through. But for me personally, it's opened new doors for me to move forward, and just financial stability for the rest of my life. I did buy a little gypsy wagon, which I put a memorial to my grandson on the front of it, which is a dream I had, and I've been able to do that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Just mainly financial stability, and I just feel now that the weight of what happened to me at Lake Alice has been lifted, not because of the money. It's just that I just think that we all need to move forward in our age group now.
unfortunately, there were those that just couldn't hold on, and for them I feel sad, but I think that, we need to move forward now.
You took that $150,000 rapid payment, and that was something you said, as soon as that was announced, you said you were interested in it. Have you got any regrets about that?
Absolutely not. I didn't even think we were going to get that amount, actually. So when that was announced, I just about fell over. I think the government moved forward very quickly with that because of our age and health issues. And I thank them very much for that. And like I just said, it's given me, and no doubt other survivors, that financial stability. And that's just another door closed, and we waited a long time for accountability. Now, we have to realise now that's never going to happen. Most of those people that inflicted the pain on us and the torture are long gone now. But, it's about us now. It's about us and looking after ourselves, absolutely.
No one was charged over what happened at Lake Alice following the police investigations in the late 70s and 2000s. After the Royal Commission, police announced a former charge nurse would face prosecution, but this was dropped because of his age. Police also would have charged the unit's lead psychiatrist, Dr. Selwyn Leeks, but he was too ill at the time. He's now passed, having died in 2022 at the age of 92.
Well, Dr. Leeks dies without being held accountable, 50 years after he opened the unit at Lake Alice. So there was a magisterial inquiry in 77, and there was an ombudsman's inquiry, and then there were 3 police investigations, but still no accountability for Dr. Leeks, who was the architect of that regime at Lake Alice.
That was Oliver Sutherland, a long-time advocate for Lake Alice survivors, speaking then on RNZ. Here's Robin again.
For me, it's just a disgrace that a madman was allowed loose in a psychiatric hospital under the assumption he was a psychiatrist, and he was using young children, that unwanted children, that as guinea pigs. And for him to get away with that right up until the day he died is a disgrace on New Zealand. And that's the way I feel. It'll always be a disgrace on New Zealand. He was a madman. And I would say he was pretty much the only mad person in Lake Alice, him and his staff. They were crazy, the things they were doing. And they were allowed to do it. So I think now, in myself, I've let go of the anger I feel towards those people. I feel sorry for them now that they had to go down that road of torturing children. And I think in the future, I'd like to say to the children's minister, if children speak up, listen to them. Listen to what they're saying, because, they're not going to be telling lies. They're afraid, and they just need people to listen to them and understand them. And I hope that's going to happen in the future. That's all I want, for children to be safe.
Your time at Lake Alice, you were here relatively early on for that child and adolescent unit, and you did try to speak up, didn't you?
Yeah. I managed to escape a couple of times out of there, once in a dreadful-looking hospital nightgown. And I ran away and I hid until dark and made my way back to Whanganui, and unfortunately I went home. That's where you go home. And my mother rang the police, and they came and brought me back to Lake Alice, and I told them what was happening to the children here, and they actually laughed at me. They laughed in my face, and I've never forgiven those police officers for that, and I doubt I ever will, because if they had have listened, then things would have happened long, long ago. And I wasn't the only child that reached out and tried to get help.
But for Robin, it's time to move on. She's accepted the $150,000 payment from the government, saying it gives her enough to fulfil her dream of owning a gypsy wagon with a memorial for her grandson, Khan.
When Khan was born, I used to look after him sometimes, as nanas do, and when he was 2 years of age, he used to come and stay with me, and we'd be out in the garden and we'd be pottering around. And I said, one day Nana's going to buy a house bus or something, a caravan or something, and you and I'll travel around the country. And he used to think I meant then, but I didn't mean then. And then when he was 6, my eldest son's house caught fire in Rotorua. And they got to my granddaughter, she was only 2 at the time, and managed to get her out of the house. But Khan had obviously seen the flames and gone and hid in the toilet, and they couldn't get to him. And my youngest son was living with them at the time because he was working in Rotorua. His name was Jason. And I was working at the SPCA in Tauranga at the time, and I got a phone call the next day to say Khan had passed away, and it broke me, absolutely broke me. Sorry. And so at his funeral, a friend of mine tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Don't you ever give up on that dream." And I said, "I'm not going to." So that money that the government gave me has enabled me to fulfil that dream. I bought a neat little gypsy wagon. It is so cute. And then I decided to get a mural put on the front of it, Khan's dream and the date of his birth and the date of his death on the front. So that's something that I always wanted to do, and it's just made that possible.
150,000 is a significant sum of money that can improve someone's life.
Lydia Osterhoff is a human rights lawyer and senior associate at Wellington firm Cooper Legal. While she's glad some of the Lake Alice victims have received monetary compensation, she questions why those tortured at other institutions haven't had similar treatment.
We're not critical of the payments to the Lake Alice survivors. We're critical of the fact that there's a lack of payment to other survivors. So what we know from the Royal Commission is that upward of 200,000 people were abused in state care. A lot of these are our clients. We've got 1,600 open clients at the moment. Most of them were in social welfare care, so that's SIFs, SIPs, what's now Oranga Tamariki. These people suffered horrific abuse and they're still out in the dark. So while for the small cohort of Lake Alice survivors, around I think between 160 to 200 still alive, I think the redress scheme is welcome. But what we're critical of is that the redress scheme for Lake Alice survivors fails to recognise that the state abused a wide range of people, and these people feel like they've been let down by the state yet again because they don't know if they're getting any form of different redress to what they're getting now, and what they're getting now is a pittance for what they went through.
Now, you've got clients who were tortured elsewhere if we look at the government's definition of torture as formaldehyde or electric shock treatment. And there was a cabinet paper released this year that said torture could have happened elsewhere, but there's no UN declaration for that. So your clients who got the same treatment elsewhere, what are they entitled to now?
So clients who received ECT and formaldehyde at Lake Alice outside of the adolescent unit or at the other psychiatric institutions in New Zealand, so that's including Oakley Hospital and Porirua Hospital, they can receive $6,000 compensation for the formaldehyde and the ECT. If they were also sexually abused, they can receive $9,000, and that is the maximum that they can receive under the Ministry of Health's scheme. So I'm sure you can understand these people are angry. They're disappointed, they feel let down, they feel that they have been treated unequally to Lake Alice survivors because in their view they were treated the same as what has been classified as torture at Lake Alice. And I think it's important there to actually say that you mentioned the cabinet paper. Actually, when the case was taken to the UN that this is based on, it was never meant to be only limited to Lake Alice. It was just that the representative plaintiff who was able to travel, was not incarcerated, was functioning enough to appear in Geneva, happened to be at Lake Alice. But the idea of going to the United Nations was always to get a declaration for the wider psychiatric institutions that what happened there was torture. And so I think a lot of the clients who were placed at these institutions might not understand that, but what they do understand is that they feel let down, they feel like they've been treated unequally, and they feel like they've been discriminated against by the state yet again, and it makes them angry.
But the government may well, and has signalled that it will, offer compensation and redress packages to more victims of abuse. It's not just to Lake Alice people. So there is something on the way. Does it matter that they have to wait?
I think it does, because how I see it is this small group of people have been put on a pedestal by the government. The government told us last year that there would be an announcement about redress at the apology, which was on the 11th of November. We were told we'd get an announcement about redress by the end of the year, and I think that is what the government was referring to, that very small cohort of Lake Alice claimants. And so this small cohort of people have been put on a pedestal, and the government is saying, look, we are responding to the Royal Commission, yet there is a whole heap of people who are sitting in the dark, waiting, constantly missing deadlines, and they're starting to get really, really cynical, and they're starting to feel like this is the government yet again letting them down, and it's a form of psychological abuse.
The Detail approached Minister Stanford on this issue and was told that an announcement will be made shortly. In the meantime, Malcolm's still waiting on a court date for his judicial review, as well as receiving cancer treatment. And while Robin waits to find a plot of land, she's organised a memorial at Lake Alice. She was going to pay for it out of her own pocket, but the Rangitikei District Council has agreed to cover the cost to build and maintain it.
Lake Alice will never go away. The buildings are all gone, but the memories of Lake Alice will never go away for the survivors. It's just pristine farmland now. There's still a couple of buildings there, but people actually live in them. They own them privately. But before the government announced that we would be offered $150,000, I told myself for a long time, even if it was $20,000 they gave me, I was going to not wait any longer for any government to decide to put a memorial out at Lake Alice, which I feel we deserve. People that passed on, that never made it, deserve. And also the returned servicemen that were dumped in here when they came back from war, they deserve a memorial.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was engineered by William Saunders and produced with the help of Davina Zimmer and Alexia Russell. Thanks to Malcolm Richards, Robin Dandy and Lydia Osterhoff. I'm Jimmy Ellingham.